This is a different video. Today, it's going to be a little bit of an editorial. Here's what we're talking about today. We're back in the Abby Zwerner case today, and again, I need to go through a little bit of the backstory. On January 6, 2023, while teaching first grade at Rich Neck Elementary School in Virginia, Ms. Zwerner was shot by a 6-year-old student who brought a 9mm semi-automatic pistol to the school. The bullet first passed through her left hand, rupturing bones in her index finger and thumb. Then the bullet entered her chest, and some fragments remain lodged there between her heart and her spine. Her lung collapsed as a result of the chest wound. Authorities described her injuries as life-threatening initially. If you subscribe to the biblical view of Adam and Eve and the creation story therein, then you have to wonder what it must have been like raising Cain and Abel. Adam and Eve had to teach their children to do the things that was going to be necessary for them all to survive. They had to teach them to grow crops, to raise animals. Along the way, they had to teach all kinds of skills to their children, and as you might guess, they had to have their children teach their grandchildren. So, when you get right down to it, the teaching profession is the oldest profession in the world, and history is full of some really great teachers. Plato and Socrates occupied those positions. In fact, the method used in law schools, the Socratic method, owes its invention to Socrates himself. What a tremendous legacy to have a theory of instruction that lives on for centuries after your death. The apostles from the Bible were great teachers. The apostle John was a physician, a man of letters. The apostle Paul was a rabbi, also a man of letters, and someone who taught and wrote a large portion of the New Testament. Martin Luther, who sought to reform the Catholic Church, was a great teacher. I'm betting that many of you have your favorite teacher in mind as I'm talking. Maybe it was your first grade teacher. Maybe it was your second or third. For me, Mrs. Hayes, who was my third grade teacher, she taught me to write cursive. I'm sure she must have thought that it would be easier to teach orangutans to sing than to teach me how to write cursive, but she persevered and eventually brought me around. Then there was Mrs. Koppelman, who taught me how to draw, and later, I encountered Vernon Harmelink, my journalism teacher, who taught me how to write. He taught me how to write in an active voice with one simple trick. I'll share it with you. I was told I could never begin a sentence with a, an, or the word at or on. And that's because those were lazy ways of writing. If you couldn't find something more exciting to say about a carnival than on September 5th there will be a carnival, then you needed to be doing something other than journalism. And so, even as I have written briefs and been engaged in all kinds of writing as a lawyer, I have tried very hard to use Mr. Harmelink's method of never beginning a sentence with a, an, the, at, or on. I went to a Jesuit law school, and I don't remember all of my professors, but I remember Father Rainey. Father Rainey taught constitutional law and administrative law. Unlike most of my classes in law school, I didn't get an A in his class, but I do feel like I learned more in his class than in most of the others, because he was a gifted teacher. I have frequently said that if society really placed a value on the worth of an individual, we would pay teachers much better than we do. Most new teachers start out somewhere between $26,000 and $30,000 a year in their first academic year. Those are wages that are barely above the poverty line, and of course, in larger school systems and those in cities with a higher cost of living, they have to be paid more. But in a situation where you have a higher cost of living, it's the same as being paid at a lower rate somewhere else. So after 4 years of academic instruction and a full semester of student teaching, as a beginning teacher, you're not really very well respected, at least not in terms of the amount of money that you're paid. Now, my wife has a Bachelor of Science degree, and she's qualified to teach science. She has a degree in education, and she's qualified to teach math. In addition to that, she has a master's degree in math, and she has an educational specialist degree with an administrative certificate to allow her to be a school administrator. And she could easily have pursued her EDD if she had wanted to. But she didn't get all of those degrees at the same time. She got them in a series over the course of about 20 years of teaching. At the end of her career, she had taught for 27 years, and she was ready to retire from the profession. And I'm glad she did, because teaching took a lot out of her. She needed to come home every day at 3:30, walk into the house, brew herself a cup of coffee, sit down and listen to nothing but peace and quiet until I got home. A lot of people think that teaching is an easy profession. You can just stand up in front of a bunch of kids all day and prattle on about the Pythagorean theorem, right triangles, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Or if you're a history teacher, talk about the French Revolution, the War of the Roses, or other historical facts. Make them memorize when the War of 1812 started. You teach from a book that was written for you to teach from, and at least from the outside, doesn't look like you have to put in a lot of time getting ready to teach. And of course, all of my teachers out there know better. They're sitting there fuming right now because they know that's how a lot of people think of them. But what they also know is that a good classroom instruction, a good teacher, begins with preparation. And most of them put in several hours of preparation at a minimum every day in order to be able to teach the subjects that they teach. While some of the knowledge that they pass along is burned into their brain, either from years of having been taught it, like 1 plus 1 equals 2, or from years of teaching it, they still have to prepare lesson plans, objectives. Some have to prepare their own testing materials, and they have to be able to use alternate methods of teaching to reach children who may not perceive the lesson in the way that they intend. We know from studies that there are auditory learners, in other words, people that you can tell something to and they get it. I think I'm probably an auditory learner since I pretty much prefer to listen to audible books as opposed to read a book. Then there are visual learners. These are people who have to see it. They have to see it either on the screen or on the blackboard, and I guess now it's called the electronic instruction device or whatever it is. They have to see it in order to process it. Now, for the auditory learner, you have to be able to convey it verbally. For the kinesthetic learner, they really need to be able to put their hands on it and twist it and turn it, hold it up, feel it. That's what kinesthetic learners are like. Now, it's sometimes hard to teach math or history in that way, although it can be done. Teachers all have to know these kinds of things in order to be good at their job. And they have to be able to transition seamlessly from one teaching method to another to reach the children in their class. And while there are certainly a few teachers out there who are not good at their jobs, I'm thinking of my high school French teacher here, there are others who simply blow you away with how good they are at what they do. And my wife was like that. In the Abby Zwerner trial, we learned that there is a chain of command in the school system. And certainly in most school systems, there is a superintendent, a principal, an assistant principal, and then teachers. Sometimes there are department heads, teachers who are elevated to the point where they are in charge of a particular department, like history or math or English. Schools are hierarchical organizations. In order for teachers to be good at their job, they need to be able to work in an environment that gives them the tools they need to succeed. Teachers don't create that environment themselves except in the limited way that they set up their classroom and use the appropriate tools that they're given. It's the administrators and people above them in that chain of command that provide those tools and that serve as the necessary link, in terms of accountability, between the taxpayers funding the schools on one side and the teachers teaching in them in the other. In most systems, a person cannot be a principal until they have been a classroom teacher for at least 2 years. That 2-year period of classroom teaching is a requirement because you cannot supervise someone in a job if you do not know how to do the job yourself. In spite of this, many administrators forget the hardships and struggles of the classroom teacher, the ones that they experienced in their 2 years of teaching, when they become an administrator. Now, certainly not all of them. My wife frequently talks about the good people that she worked with in the administration. She understood that she was just as important in making the administration good at their jobs as the administration was at making her good in her job. Sometimes she got a lot of pushback. And at one point in her career, she received very inappropriate discipline for doing something that she had not done. She was eventually able to get that expunged from her record, and she prayed that she could forgive the people who did that to her, and she got there. She was able to do that. I think that is so important. If your child is not learning anything in school, it could be the teacher, but it could also be the principal above that teacher not providing the resources or the support for her to get the job done. Particularly in classrooms that mainstream kids with learning disabilities, a teacher may spend a lot more time with them one-on-one than she does with the other kids in the class. So if your child isn't getting the instruction in the amount that they need, it maybe not is due to the teacher so much as the environment and the principal's failure to put somebody else in there with her to team teach. When you go in to talk to a teacher, it's important to remember that they're only one part of the education equation. The people above them are just as important. One of the reasons that I decided to do the Abby Zwerner case was because my wife had taught, and she had told me all the stories about how sometimes the administration makes life difficult for the classroom teacher. But as we've talked about this case, she has told me that she has never, in her 27 years, ever experienced something like Abby experienced. When someone called in a bomb threat to her school and mentioned her name and her classroom by name, her administrators rallied behind her, moved her to a different classroom, and pushed for the prosecution of the individual who did it. They understood their job, and so did the local district attorney, who ensured that person was held accountable under the law. If the situation that developed in Abby's case is any indication, she never really had a good chance to be a successful teacher because she had really bad administration. There is a way for teachers to fix that. They vote with their feet and move on to a different school and teach either in a different school or a different system. But I would imagine that Abby never thought that her principal would leave her alone in her room with a child with a gun and do nothing about it. I say that sentence and it still boggles the mind that she did that. There is much the jury in this case has not been told. A subscriber sent me a video from the news channel that interviewed the mom of JT. This was right before her case was set to go to trial in Virginia. She was charged with essentially not locking up the firearm. I'm not certain what the charge was, but I know that she received 4 years in prison for it. She was found guilty. Although it seems odd to say this, I came away from that video with the idea that she really loved her child and she wanted to advocate for him. But to her credit, she apologized to Abby. And she also apologized to the other students in the room. She said, "He was my son, and I have to be accountable for what he did." And it wasn't just words she was speaking. You could tell that this was a heartfelt apology. She understood the trauma those people went through. And yet Dr. Parker has yet to apologize for the outcome. Perhaps her lawyers will offer a throwaway line or two about how she regrets the outcome, but she wouldn't have done anything different because everything she did, as you all know, was just perfectly okay, according to that ridiculous expert on school safety they put up. Abby is seeking civil accountability in this trial, and I often tell clients when I interview them that the only thing I can do for them as a plaintiff's attorney is win them money. I can't turn back the hand of time. I can't magically erase the trauma that they've suffered. All I can do is convince a jury that they were wronged and they deserve compensation. I heard a gentleman named Marcus Jarr, a lawyer from Maryland and a frequent speaker at American Association of Justice events, speak about one of his more painful experiences as a lawyer. He was going into court and winning a sizable judgment for a man who lost both legs in a train accident. The train rolled over his legs. The people who were responsible at the company did not want to pay up, and he won them a sizable judgment. And Marcus was very happy with the result of the judgment. A man was awarded a significant sum. And several weeks after they handed the man the check from the insurance company, Marcus got a call from the man, and he said, "I want my legs back." The sad fact is that no matter how good Diana Toscano and her team are, Abby's twin sister and Abby's mother will never get the old Abby back. They will get this traumatized Abby back, and they'll work with her to make her whole again. And I'll be praying for them because I know they have a long road in front of them. Hopefully, their faith will guide them and they will get Abby back somewhat close to where she was before this all happened. I'm also hoping that the prosecutors are successful in proving up the case against Dr. Parker for what she didn't do on that day. She sat in front of a computer instead of doing her job. Perhaps what's more galling than anything else is she clearly doesn't think she did anything wrong. She sits in that courtroom and she scowls at the experts who tell her she did do something wrong. She scowls at the witnesses against her. She even scowled at Abby when Abby testified. I'll be praying for her too. She first has to come to terms with where she failed before she can understand the weight of what she did not do. I hope all of you who are of this mind will join me in praying for both Abby and Dr. Parker. That may seem counterintuitive. Were it not for Dr. Parker, there wouldn't be a case. There wouldn't be a traumatized Abby. But it's just as important to pray for those who have wronged us as it is to pray for ourselves and our loved ones. As you all know, I have a strong faith in Jesus Christ. My job isn't to proselytize, but to educate on the law, and much of our law comes from a biblical root. But just as I tell people at the end of every video that they should go out and do a kindness every day, I feel compelled to point out that it's just important to pray for Dr. Parker. If you're the kind of person that prays, pray for both of these women. They both have a long road in front of them. Today we hear closing arguments, and I'll be hoping that the jury does the right thing. After closing arguments, I'll do a video highlighting what parts I think are the most important. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here today. If you have the opportunity today, try to do one kind thing to help somebody else. Any kind thing will do. Buy somebody a Coke, get them a cup of coffee. Anything that makes their day better, that would be a way to help make the world a better place. Because after all, isn't that what we're all after? Now, YouTube has a few things that they think you might be interested in, and they're going to be showing you that right up there.